Well, hello everyone. This is your friendly neighborhood pastor coming to you from Christ the King Lutheran Church. We are getting ready for this weekend, which is the 8th Sunday after Pentecost, and we are again in the third week of our 3-week foray into Matthew chapter 13, which is just covered with Jesus's parables. And so this week we get a bunch of parables, just bam, 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 right in a row. And so one of the tasks for the preacher is, of course, which one do you focus on? Because there's so much depth and richness in these parables. You can't focus on them all, but it would be nice if you could, but you can't. And so we're forced to deal with that. So we're going to be looking at all these parables, and I'll just give you some leads as we dive in, and who knows where the good Lord will lead me this weekend, but here is a taste of things to come. So Matthew writes in his Gospel, chapter 13, verses 31 to 33 and 44 to 52, he says, Jesus put before the crowds another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed that someone took and sowed in his field. It is the smallest of all the seeds, but when it has grown, it is the greatest of shrubs and becomes a tree, so that the birds of the air come and make nests in its branches. He told them another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like yeast that a woman took and mixed in with 3 measures of flour until all of it was leavened. The kingdom of heaven is like a treasure hidden in a field, which someone found and hid, then in his joy goes and sells all that he has and buys the field. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant in search of fine pearls. On finding one pearl of great value, he went and sold all that he had and bought it. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a net that was thrown into the sea and caught fish of every kind. When it was full, they drew it ashore, sat down, put the good into baskets, but threw out the bad. So it will be at the end of the age. The angels will come out and separate the evil from the righteous and throw them into the furnace of fire, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Have you understood all of this? They, the disciples, answered, Yes. And he said to them, Therefore every scribe who has been trained for the kingdom of heaven is like the master of a household who brings out his treasure, what is new and what is old. The gospel of the Lord. So here we have 6 different parables, sayings about the kingdom of heaven. The kingdom of heaven is like. And so in the last couple weeks, we heard about the parable of the seed and the sower and the soil, the 4 different ways that people can respond to the gospel. Last week, we looked at the parable of the wheat and the weeds, how the wheat and the weeds grow up together, and God will sort out this mixed bag in the world, the field being the world, but also I think it's also alluding to the church as well. But this week we get parables that talk about growth that you can see, like a mustard tree mustard seed that grows up into a blossoming bush where all things can go in there and nest. We hear the parable about the hidden growth. The kingdom of heaven is like leaven being thrown into some bread. We hear about the value of the kingdom being likened to someone selling all that they have to find this treasure which was hidden but was found, and because you found it, you sell all that you have so you can have that parcel of land, more so that you have the treasure that's buried in that land. And then we get the value of the kingdom being likened to a pearl of great value, that you sell everything that you have in order that you may possess this one thing. Then we also get another parable of judgment, the kingdom of heaven being like a dragnet, fishermen throwing nets overboard, and you just pick up anything and everything you can, and then once you bring the net to shore, you just sort out the good stuff from the bad stuff. And anyone who's gone fishing know that you can catch fish that you like, and you catch fish that you don't need, some which are invasive species and you need to kill right away. Like around here, there's little gobies. Once you catch them, you got to kill them because they're an invasive species. But this image of judgment that we heard back with the wheat and the weeds, how the angels will separate, and so we get this thing of judgment in this parable as well. And then we also hear Jesus tell the disciples, likening them to scribes, but also to the apostles and to the church today, that we who have been trained for the kingdom of heaven, we bring out the joy of what this kingdom means, of what is new and what is old. And so lots of things talking about the kingdom, of heaven. And so, like I said before, the first couple parables allude to growth. Sometimes you can see growth in the church very visibly, and we give thanks to God for that. Of course, all the centuries, and with 2,000 years of church history, we can see how Jesus' prediction of the church growing and being very visible growth come to fruition. He, after all, was God and know how things are gonna plan and pan out. And so he talks about that visible growth of the church, and we see that today in many countries, many lands, many tribes, and in many tongues. That Pentecost has shot the church out all over the world, and it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. Then we hear about the hidden growth, and this is what's difficult about ministry here and now, because you don't always see the growth that is happening in the life of a believer. This parable could be talking about something else too, the church being leaven in the world, kind of like what Jesus says in Matthew 5 about being salt and light, that we are to bring this savor and this light into a dark and tasteless world, but we also are leaven in a world that is, flat, and so the Christian church brings life and vitality to the world. The second couple of parables talk about the value of the kingdom, and I think this is very important because in our day and age, there's so many things that we value, that we love. Do we love the kingdom of heaven? More importantly, more specifically, I should say, do we love the king of that kingdom, Jesus, with all that we are and with all that we have? And so that those couple parables about the value of the kingdom, and by extension the value of the king, is a great challenge to us to say, what are our chief priorities in our lives, and is God just kind of in the background there, just like a picture hanging on the wall who we go to from time to time when we have issues, or is God an everyday part of our lives, because we can't live without him, because he is our treasure, he is our chief desire, he is our chief love that reorders and orients everything else because of who he is and what he has done for us in Jesus Christ. So the value of the kingdom, of the king who has come into our lives. What are we willing to give up to love and serve and obey and follow this king, to be citizens of this kingdom? The parable of the fish, I won't go into too great a detail on that. That's pretty clear that there are eternal repercussions for how we respond to the kingdom of heaven. Will we accept it, or will we reject it? Those who accept and live in light of the gospel, all those who believe in the good news, who have been justified by faith alone, by faith alone, are righteous by the blood of the Lamb, and because of that we are welcomed into the kingdom. Those who don't go to the other place. So Jesus again lifts up the reality of hell, the eternal consequence of life lived separate and apart from God because they just don't want it. So we can't sugarcoat what Jesus is saying here. But also the final parable talking about the importance of the church and us pastors who bring out the joy of this treasure, this old treasure, but also in new and fresh ways. The gospel never changes. How we communicate that certainly can change, as long as it's faithful to the scriptures, faithful to our Lord and to our Master. So lots of stuff going on here. Can't certainly go into great detail on all of it, but may the good Lord lead and guide you as you dig into these parables and enjoy the challenge, and but also ultimately be comforted, because as Jesus says elsewhere, fear not, little flock, it is the Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. Jesus says that in Luke's gospel. But we'll talk to you next time. So God bless, take care, and we'll see you later.